Welcome back to the channel. This is Ron with Stay Sharp. We do a lot of sharpening videos for broadheads if you've been a follower of this channel, and typically I'll do it based on customer requests, and in this case I am doing the knockoff sold on Amazon or eBay Chinadermics, the knockoff of the Rage head. So I bought a bag of them, 12 for $12 or $1 a piece. I wish somebody could do something about stopping this knockoff stuff from happening. But apparently there are still people who will buy this sort of junk, and I'm going to look at sharpening it. They come in a bag all kind of knocking together here, so I'm sure that contributes to the dullness. But as I look at these edges, wow, it's almost as if they didn't even try. They look serrated. There is some rough grinds. So we're going to take this head apart. We're going to look at the blade under the microscope. We're going to put it in the sharpness tester, use the same protocols that we always do, and we will see if we can get this sharper. I don't know the recipe for the steel in this blade. I'm assuming it's stainless steel, but I'm guessing it's soft, low quality. So I will be back, and then we will look at how to sharpen this blade. Well, that was a pretty terrible looking edge under the microscope. These knockoffs are just atrocious. They do not seem to care about sharpness at all. Let's see what we get for an edge. My guess is it's going to be a pretty high score. We might have a new record for dullness here. Oh, man. The blade even slipped in the jaws. It was so dull, it was pushing the blade in. 901. That is a new dullness record out of the box. So the best solution for the knockoff Rages would be our replaceable blade guide. This is the positioning of it. You've got a lot of unsupported blade here, so if you push down hard, that blade will flex. Now there's a lot of reasons to use very light pressure when you're sharpening. Here's another one. You don't want that blade to flex. Like we do with every blade, we color it up with Sharpie. We want to see if we've got the blade positioned properly, and this is a double bevel, so we will do both sides. To test position, I'm using a 1200 grit, either 12 or 2500. You don't want anything too aggressive. And then I will just give it a few light strokes to see what the marker wear looks like. Alright, wow, look at that chop. Holy smokes. We'll flip it over on the other side. Same thing. like a serrated knife. They don't mean it to be that way. It's just that's how bad the grind is. If you're buying these things, you're buying work. These are not hunt ready out of the box. The edge on here is just incredible. Absolutely incredibly terrible. Alright, so I'm going to get to sharpening. Because it's so bad, I'm going to have to go through all the grits, starting with 240, 400, 800, 1200, 2500 grit. And we will go from there. I'll be back. Alright, so I'm going to start sharpening this with the 240 grit plate. I'll go on one side until I get a burr. That's what this piece of paper is all about. If you've watched any of my videos, you understand how I preach the burr. So I will start on one side and come back once I have a burr achieved, and we'll talk about that. Alright, well, I watched the clock and I only sharpened for 3 minutes, and I can tell you already, this may be the softest steel I've ever dealt with. I know I've got a burr already. Yeah. And that's what you need to do. You need to get a burr along the entire edge. That is your signal to then flip it over and break off this burr, develop a second burr. When I get the second burr with 240, that's my signal to go to 400 and repeat the process. 2 burrs with each grit. But this steel is equivalent to the lid of a tuna can. It's pretty darn soft. So I'm going to keep going. Alright, after getting 2 burrs with the 240 grit plate, I am now going to go to 400. I'll get a burr on both sides and we'll keep going. So here I am at 400 grit, a grand total of 2 minutes, and yes, we have a burr that the paper catches on. I'm able to throw up a burr pretty quick with steel this soft. So now I'll flip it over and get a second burr at 400 and then switch to 800. When I switch between plates, it's always a good idea to wipe off the guide, the roller, make sure there's no 400 grit granular debris that I would contaminate the 800 grit plate with. So when I get done with this, I'll wipe it down, then go to 800 grit. Each time I switch to a different plate grit, I will clean this up so I do not contaminate the next finer grit. So I'm going to keep going. Alright, after just a few minutes on the 800 grit plate, let's see how we're doing. So we have a burr along the entire edge. That is my signal to flip it over, get a second burr at 800, clean up the guide before switching to 1200. So I will keep going. Alright, so we're on the 1200 grit plate on the first side, so let's see how we're doing. We've achieved a burr at 1200 grit. That's my signal to flip it over, do the other side, and then go to 2500 grit. When I get to the second burr on 2500 grit, I will do a few alternating strokes just to make sure that I've broken off any remnant of the burr. Leaving burr behind will show up under the microscope and in the sharpness tester, and it will appear that the blade is dull only because there is still burr left behind. So taking a few extra flopping strokes, a few on one side, flop it over, do the other side, is just cheap insurance to make sure you're getting rid of the burr. One of the questions I also get is, how can you tell when your diamond plates are wore out? A plate like a 2500 grit is pretty smooth to begin with. Well, it's like scratching your fingernails on a chalkboard. This is 2500 grit. If you're getting that chatter, you still have great diamond plate left. The material is not going to wear out that fast, especially if you're not pushing down hard. Your fingernails will really erode on the lower grits like 240 and 400, but if you're getting that screechy sound, you still have very good diamond plate usage. Alright, from here we're going to switch over to buffing compound next. The final step in the sharpening process is the buffing compound process, and buffing compound is a wax crayon with an abrasive granule particulate suspended in the wax. The wax does nothing. All that is the vehicle for the granular grit. So in this case I'm using cereal box cardboard. There's no need to spend money on an expensive leather strop. You can do this with denim, wood, cereal box cardboard. Leather just happens to be the material of the bygone days. It's the buffing compound that does the work, not the backing. When you buff, also push down with very light pressure. Do a backward roll, lift, and continue that process. You don't want to go forward because you'll cut the cardboard or leather or wood or denim, whatever you're buffing on, and you'll cut the buffing compound off. You cannot overdo this step. You can do this till your heart's content. You're not removing that much metal, but you are producing a scalpel's edge that produces incredibly low scores, low being good, on the force meter to cut the certified medium, that thin wire. And the finer and more polished and more scalpel-like that edge is, the more cutting you will do, the more lethal that blade will be. So do a bunch on one side. You're not going to feel a burr. It's too small. So kind of keep even stroke counts. If you do 30 on one side, do 30 on the other. And then as you keep going, do degrading counts. So maybe then 20, 20, 10, 10, 5, 5, 2, 2, 1, 1, keeping it even on both sides. But what you're doing is you're producing a mirror finish that you're going to have a far better edge for doing this. Now some guys don't like a buffed edge. They like a little toothier edge. It's entirely up to you. You own the edges you hunt with. So if you don't want to buff it, don't. I find that I've tested enough edges and done scoring after buffing. I always get a sharper edge because of the buffed edge. But if you like a toothier edge, entirely up to you. So I'm going to keep going on this, and we're going to look at it under the microscope, and then finally in the sharpness tester to see what sort of a score we get. I'll be right back. That was a very good looking edge under the microscope, and certainly a lot better than when we started. That edge was pretty terrible. But let's see what we've done as far as sharpening goes. $89. That's a lot sharper. That is a razor blade quality, which is what you would have expected when you buy a head like this. You'd expect razor blade quality. What we got was butter knife quality. Now the steel is soft, very poor quality. I suspect the ferrule is the same. These don't spin very well. So if you consider buying this sort of a knockoff know that you're getting inferior metals, inferior tolerances, terrible grinds. They can be made sharp. I contend that this head wouldn't stay sharp going through a deer. It's soft enough metal that the ribs would probably destroy the blade. Certainly it's a single-use type head, so I caution you, buy the good quality heads that are made by the original manufacturers versus the knockoffs. It's just the right thing to do. Those companies pay Pittman Roberts fees that help support hunting and fishing, whereas the knockoff companies from overseas pay none of those taxes, pay none of those fees. So there's a lot of reasons not to buy the knockoffs. But I had enough requests from customers, hey, can you get that sharp? And certainly 89 is an edge better than a razor blade, and I know that because I've tested razor blades, and I'll show you right now. So there you have it. That is the Rage Hypodermic knockoff, or the Chinadermic. Thanks for watching.